Well, speaking of grace and truth, I want to introduce you to two of my friends, Donna and Kevann Carter. This is a mother and daughter team that created a podcast called Grow on the Go, highlighting the importance of growing in our relationship with God. Well, welcome to 700 Club Canada, ladies.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us.
Well, your Grow on the Go podcast, it's in its 5th season. Congratulations. That's so awesome. Donna, tell us why you started the podcast and what listeners can expect.
Sure. Actually, we finished our 5th season and we'll be starting our 6th in September.
Great.
But I started the podcast because I, as a speaker and an author, I'd be out there at speaking engagements and often I would be one of the youngest women in the room. And I wondered, what are young women doing to grow in their faith? They're not going to retreats or conferences. They're not going to Bible studies. How are they growing? And I realized they are listening to podcasts. And so I thought, well, what if we could help young women grow on the go? Hence the name. Yeah. And so we try to pick relevant topics. We look at what the Bible has to say about them. We chat about how that's relevant in our culture. And, Kevann is the demographic that we're trying to reach. So she was the logical co-host for me.
Well, it's so great. I love it because you guys are so real. And that really connects, I think, with any age. Kevann, not everyone can work with their mother, let's be honest. So can you describe your dynamic as a ministry team and what makes for a great mother-daughter connection?
Not everyone could work with their mother, but not every mother could work with me. Our dynamic is very much mom brings a lot of insight and teaching, and I just mock her relentlessly the entire time. And it seems to work.
That's great.
Realistically, mom and I are really similar in a lot of ways. We have very similar temperaments. We communicate very similarly, and I'm just a little bit more raw.
I feel like in many ways, Kevann is a more honest version of me.
Oh.
I think if I'd grown up in her generation, I would be a lot more like her.
That's really neat.
Yeah.
Is that true, Kevann?
I don't know if mom's being untruthful. I wouldn't know that unless she told me. But we are very similar in a lot of ways, but we differ just enough that I think it makes for a really interesting dynamic. And I don't know, I've never been anyone else's daughter, but I really think just respecting different viewpoints is really critical to like a good mother-daughter relationship and by extension podcast. And I think what makes our dynamic pretty compelling is that we have a lot of fun. And if something goes sideways, we joke about it and move on.
That's right. Well, I think that's a really good point, is the respect. I mean, I've got a daughter too, and I've got some daughter-in-laws, and I would agree with you, Kevann, on that. It works for really any relationship, right?
Yeah.
But
well,
Donna,
I think the authenticity is really critical. We are close, and so we're willing to share deeply with each other, and it just happens to be on the air some of the time.
yeah.
It was funny. We went out for dinner with Matt Cain, he's the president of Faith Strong Today. That's the platform that hosts our podcast. And he hadn't met us before. And Kevann and I are sitting in the back seat of their car. And he says to his wife, I feel like I'm listening to a podcast right now. That's just who we are together.
Yeah, well, that's what's so real and authentic about it. You're right. Donna, you both have a heart to see people have spiritual conversations with unbelieving friends. I love how honest you are in your conversations. Tell us about your new monthly share show, you call it, and what the impact has been.
Right. So we started the share show. It's our last show of the month, every month. And it's designed for a woman of faith to share with her friend who doesn't yet know God. And then to follow up with a conversation afterward, to try and build a bit of a bridge so that conversation is a little bit easier, to be able to say, okay, so what did you think about that share show on anxiety? Like, what did you like about it? What didn't you like? And get them to the 5-yard line in having a significant spiritual conversation.
That's really good. Kevann, would you say the same for you? Like, have you seen an impact from those shows?
Yeah, I think I think the biggest impact that we can have is, again, being authentic. And I think that's really what people are thirsty for, especially people that are seeking.
Yeah.
And so that's where I see the biggest impact, or at least potential for impact.
Yeah. Well, I encourage people to check it out. You're right. It's on Strong Today. That's the network that you're connected with. And Kevann, what would you say to our viewers about how to connect with the younger generation? I mean, you said, really you're the target audience here. And what matters the most to your generation?
I think that's something that I could speak about at length. And, it's interesting. I'm a millennial. I'm no longer the youngest adult generation.
Yeah.
But I think it's fair to say that millennials and Gen Z, we want everybody and anybody to take responsibility and be authentic, which is something we've talked about this entire conversation. And so I think the church has hurt a lot of people. And I think before we can get anywhere with younger generations, saved or not, we need to take responsibility for that hurt. We need to make restitution where we can. And we need to drop sort of the shiny, polished veneer of what being a Jesus follower is and has been for decades, if not centuries, and just be real people who are deeply, deeply flawed and covered by the grace of God.
Yeah.
I think that authenticity is the best way we can connect.
So good. Well, we're going to be talking about the grace of God on this show. So thank you for just setting that up for us. Thank you for what you do, ladies. Keep doing it. Keep just having real conversations. And I believe you're
podcast app that you go to, Grow on the Go, or you can go to faithstrongtoday.com and all the icons are there.
That's great. And we'll have all that information at 700club.ca. So check it out. And thanks again for joining us today. We really appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
Thanks.